Hello, music fans. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dark Helmet, and we are going to be taking you on a journey through the Queen catalog, starting with the first album, going song by song, and we'll touch a little bit on the details of the song and any information we might know. Hopefully, along the way, we have fun, we learn a few things. But before we get into the talking about the album, I just wanted to touch a little bit on my video release yesterday. um, Queen being the greatest of all time, or my argument for it. I just so much appreciation. It had such a great response. It was so good to see so many familiar names back. I'd been away from doing this for about a year, and my fear was I was gonna, you know, ramble on for however long I ended up talking yesterday, and nobody was actually going to pay attention or watch it. But I was quite surprised when I got up and I saw it was actually seemed to be pretty well received. So I'm just feeling really blessed to have such great support from all of you. And it was good to see, like I say, so many familiar names again after such a long time. So yeah, just a little shout out and appreciation for all of you who left comments and watch my video. And like I say, I was very, very pleased to see such a positive response. So, and again, before we get into the album, just I noticed a lot of people watching, very few people subscribing. So I want to push my channel forward. So if you enjoy the content, please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. It's free, and we'll have a good journey together, and we'll have a lot of fun. For some of you, discovering Queen music, and for many of you, just kind of reliving the experience and the first time listens of such a deep, diverse catalog as Queen. So, first thing we're doing is we're going to be, as you can see, touching on the Queen 1 album. I've got my albums here as well. We'll start with the first one, and that is, of course, is Queen 1. As you can see, this is a little different. I've actually got a red uh, cover where traditionally, or most of the albums I've ever seen, they're all the purple, much like you see on the screen here. So I'm not sure why that is. I've kind of done a little research to see if I could figure it out, and I don't know. I've never really got a good answer to it. I can only presume it might be because it's the Canadian release. I don't know why it would have been different for Canada, but if it is a Canadian release, and I would imagine there probably wasn't too many of these albums sold in Canada. So I don't know. I don't know how rare this album would be. And I mean, it was a party album, and it's all beat up. There's no value as far as it's not priceless by any means. But I can't imagine there would be too many of this album out there right now. It's no different. It's got all the same images and such as the other release, the purple release. Just a few notes on this that I always thought was quite amusing. His first is Brian May playing Jesus here. You don't see him in a beard too often, right? That is, he looks. He's well, there is a song called Jesus on the album after all, right? And the other thing is, some of you may know already, but you can see the names there: Freddie Mercury vocals, piano; Brian May guitars, piano, vocals, and Deacon John. And they did that because they thought it sounded a little more regal. By Queen 2, they had gone back to John Deacon, of course, but that's interesting that they decided to go with Deacon John on the first one, and Roger Meadows Taylor, which eventually is just shortened to Roger Taylor again as the band moved forward. But if you haven't seen, there's some great pictures back here. And another one that I just really noticed recently is up. Let's see, up here, Brian May in the Penguin outfit. Isn't that like I'm Going Slightly Mad? Wasn't he wearing something very similar to that? Which is kind of interesting because it's 20 years apart, but there's a little bit of foreshadowing there apparently. Um, so yeah, where did the album start? So we're gonna go back a little bit. We're gonna go back to the beginning. We're gonna push back against the movie a little bit here. The movie gave you the impression that Freddie Mercury had just kind of recently discovered Queen or Smile at the time, but really Tim Stoffel and Freddie Mercury were friends long before Freddie joined the band. They went to school together. They were good friends, and it was actually Tim Stoffel who introduced Freddie Mercury to the band, or Farouk Balsara at the time. He didn't change his name until closer to when the band really started performing together. And if I recall correct, the first date that Queen ever played as the four members we all know them as was in on July 2nd, 1971, which is interesting because my birthday is July 1st, so perhaps I can take a little credit there for my sixth birthday. Queen formed and played their first concert at Surrey College, and which is interesting because it was a couple of years later. I mean, they had toured quite a bit for a couple of years before they were able to get around to putting this album together. So they went into Delane Leah Studios, and they cut a demo there. On that demo was "Keep Yourself Alive," "Liar," "Jesus," "The Night Comes Down," "Great King Rat." Those were the five demo songs they put together in the studio, and they had an agreement with the studio that they could use the studio during basically off time, like in the middle of the night and such, with the agreement that they would help test out some of the recording equipment. Because it was very high-tech stuff at the time. A lot of people were just learning how to use this equipment, and yeah, Queen was fortunate enough or talented enough to get themselves in there to help test that equipment, and it brought about the demo. And it was while they were recording this demo that Roy Thomas Baker came by and heard. Sorry, I'm going to put this down. Roy Thomas Baker heard them playing and I guess discovered them in a way, and so they did their demo and they sent it out. They sent it out to pretty much every studio that was around, and they really got no response. And they kept trying, so they finally got an offer from Chrysalis Records, but apparently it was a very low-ball offer. So I'm guessing they probably recognized that Queen was desperate to be signed, and were, as music executives do, they did their best to try to take advantage of them. But the Queen was smart enough to turn down that deal and thought that they could do better. And it was Roy Thomas Baker who actually introduced Queen to Barry and Norman Sheffield, who who became quite famous in the Queen storyline, especially Norman Sheffield, of course, um, for the "Death on Two Legs" song, which is kind of funny because "Death on Two Legs," of course, was a song about Norman Sheffield, and I guess a lot of people would have assumed that there was a lot of anger and hate between them. But just an interesting note, the Bohemian Rhapsody video that, of course, became so famous was actually produced by Norman Sheffield's company. So they still had some working relationship even after their fallout. So that's just I thought that was quite an interesting note, because when you listen to the lyrics of "Death on Two Legs," of course, you would think that they were about ready to kill each other, but that wasn't the case. They still obviously had a little bit of a working relationship, at least in the short term, and it seemed to have worked out pretty well, because we all know Bohemian Rhapsody, not just the song, but the video, so iconic, being credited as like the first music video ever produced to promote a song. There's a lot of videos made previous to that with bands, but it was just usually them playing to the track. It was never meant to promote the song. It was just meant to put a visual that could be played. So anyways, yeah, so we have our five songs. We got our demo, and it finally got sent out and signed eventually by Norman Sheffield and Barry Sheffield and Trident Records. So they went into the studio and they started redoing the songs with Roy Thomas Baker. And I guess the first song they did was "Keep Yourself Alive." And Brian May just did not like it. He didn't like the way it was remixed. He really liked the original version that they did in Delane Leah Studios. Apparently he still has a copy of that. I would love to hear it, because talking to Brian, it makes it sound like that was the best version of "Keep Yourself Alive" that they ever produced. But I don't think I've ever heard it. Maybe I have. I don't remember ever hearing it. But anyway, so they remixed "Keep Yourself Alive" like half a dozen times, maybe more, and they just couldn't get a sound that they liked. And so they eventually brought in Mike Stone, who was their engineer, and his mix was the one that they decided to go on the album. And of course, he went on to produce, for the next 4 or 5 albums, he was their engineer producer in the studio with them, and I guess very instrumental in helping create the Queen sound that we all love today. And it was during this time when they were recording in Trident Studios that Freddie branched out a little bit again to kind of help out, experiment with music. And that's when he recorded some songs under the name Larry Lyrics, which was just kind of a parody of a very popular musician at the time called Gary Glitter. And I Can Hear Music and Going Back, I believe, are the two songs. Both of those are available to see on YouTube. So if you're interested and you haven't heard those ones, go give them a listen. I quite like them, and they were kind of working with what they called the wall of sound at the time. They were, new experimentation with sounds, and as it turned out with Queen through their entire careers, they were on the forefront of engineering and the forefront of technology. And it started that way, and all the way to the end, it was much the same, and that's really credit to Queen, and and just the genius of this band, and always trying to push things beyond the norm to try to create new and interesting things. So anyways, on I guess it was July 13th, 1973, the album got released. um, What's interesting to note is some of the other music that was being released at the time, just to give you an idea. When you listen to the Queen album and the sounds that they were making compared to, what was being produced at the time, and what the other bands, the big bands, were doing. Like for instance, the Who's Quadrophenia, a very famous album, was released in 1973. Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy was released around that time. Alice Cooper's Billion Dollar Babies, another great album. David Bowie's Aladdin Sane, who I loved. David Bowie, I think I might have been a David Bowie fan before I was a Queen fan, but it's too long ago and the timeline's too muddled. I can't remember. The Rolling Stones, Goat's Head Soup was released, and probably one of the best albums of all time came out in 1973, and that was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. So that just gives you an idea when you're listening, when we get into the album and we start listening to these songs, it's just kind of interesting to compare what Queen was making at the time compared to what was popular at the time. And so yeah, 1973 would have been a tough year to have a hit album, just simply because so many great artists were putting out some of their best work in 1973. So yeah, I think Queen's first album charted at about topped out at about 24th on the charts in the UK. I believe it was 83 in America. So nothing particularly special. I mean, enough for people to notice, but they certainly didn't come out like gangbusters. Unlike today, where so many bands come out with sometimes their best music on their first album, and then they just kind of slowly fade away after that. And that really says it's not easy to produce large volumes of good music. These artists, they go in there and they have all their best music and they throw it all on their first album, and then they get, writer's block or whatever, or maybe they just, weren't that talented to begin with and only had enough material to really make a decent album. But, as we know with Queen, especially through those first half a dozen or so albums, you can really see the evolution of the music. And you can, when you're listening to some of the early sounds, you can kind of pick up on them a little later, and it's just very interesting to kind of follow that path that Queen took to get to where they were. And I think that's probably pretty common for any experimental band. You're always gonna see fine tuning on a sound that just keeps getting better and better. And sometimes you're going to flash back a little bit, and they're going to borrow from some of the early stuff, and yeah, and just produce and build on that, and kind of produce a clearer uh, higher production sound what Queen did. You go. I don't want to get too much in future albums, but like I've always said, like March of the Black Queen, I always thought was Bohemian Rhapsody's older, less polished sister. I've said this many times, and that applies to a lot of the songs when you're talking about Queen. You get little hints of these early songs, and you hear them in more refined ways later on in their catalog. So yeah, there was a few songs that were recorded that never made the album. They were Mad the Swine, Silver Salmon, Polar Bear, and a song called Hangman. Again, all these songs are available on YouTube to hear. So they're not well produced per se, but they're interesting to listen to because it is early Queen music that we that were never that didn't show up on the early album. So they're for that alone they're very interesting to listen to. Hangman was one that I had heard a long time. I remember getting a Queen bootleg album in the mid 70s, probably about 76, and I believe it was a bootleg album from Japan, and it actually had Hangman on it. And I remember I loved that song. That was a great song. I used to listen to that one all the time. And so check out, like I say, check out YouTube for those four songs. Give them a listen. Some of them are quite interesting, especially Freddie's vocals were quite diverse on these. I think it was it Silver Salmon? I think he might have been a little bit of a falsetto, something he really perfected by the time he got around to Cool Cat, one of my favorite Queen songs. I just love that falsetto. And it was also around this time that um, yeah. No, I had already mentioned the Larry Lyrics because it was around the time that Queen released or were making their album that Freddie did his Larry Lyric stuff, which is, like I said before, also available. Check that out as well. We're not going to get around to doing those. I'm not going to add those. I just want to stick to the albums. So there's a lot of tunes sometimes that got cut from albums. But and some that were actually added later on and re-releases of the album. I'm not going to touch on those. I just want to stick with the original albums, the original songs, and we'll go from there. So that's it. Queen 1 is here, and I'm never going to get that right. And I can't wait to dig into that. Hopefully, I'll get around to doing the first couple of cuts tonight, so I'll release those. I don't know if I'm going to release them all at once. I'll probably just release maybe one a day, or I might do something like, Keep Yourself Alive. I'll do the studio album and a live cut, and I'll release those in a day. And I just want to spread it out a little bit. I don't want to throw all this out in a short time. So I hope you enjoy the ride. Um, like I say, please subscribe. Please share, hit the notification button if you want to know as soon as possible when these are released. I'm going to try to be consistent. I'm home from work now, so I'm going to be doing these late at night. Might be a little bit tired, so forgive me if I ramble on a little bit or if my energy level seems a little low. It's not because I'm not loving what I'm hearing. It's just because I had a long day. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next cut.